There is a global part and there's a local part. We'll come to the local part, right? Let's see the global part. In the global part, global end goods demand is not as strong as what some of these inflation indicators and port congestion seem to suggest. Right? So we have a global goods demand proxy, like retail. It's consumption demand. Of course, there is also investment demand, which I don't think is very strong too. Outside of the US, or other than the US, almost every market is either at trend or below trend. In particular, goods demand in China, which is now a very large part of global goods demand, is actually quite weak. Right? So it's well below trend. And it's also not showing any signs of improvement. Right? So the end demand for goods, which you would expect would be the first sign of sustained inflation, is not that strong. That's point one. The second thing is that as the economies open up, now, vaccination globally is doing very well. And there are economies like India where the natural immunity through infection itself is now high enough, so things are open. So many parts, like the energy ecosystem, is now coming close to the pre-pandemic level. Now think about the marginal producer of gas or oil or coal, who for 18 to 24 months had been seeing subdued demand and was actually forced to cut production or just close the mine. Now you need to get them back. Right, so you were you were at 100, you came down to 85 in the first wave of lockdowns, you went up to 93, 94. Now you are at 99 or maybe even 100, and now that production needs to come back. Now that guy is sitting and wondering, I have seen this story before. I was forced to lay off people, cut down, book losses, pay mothballing costs, and I had to shut down my mine or field or whatever. I'm not going to come back. You need to show that producer sustained high prices for that production to come back. Now, this is very different from the 2007-8 period where there was no spare capacity. Right? So that was the time when China was booming, India was booming, emerging markets were booming everywhere. GDP growth was 4-5%, even the developed markets. And suddenly there was a shortage of oil and there were not enough fields developed. So oil had to go to 150. This is a point at which you need to give a price signal which is large enough for the supply to hit, and we are starting to see that. So what happened in India was, I guess, more administrative and seasonal, meaning that as rains ended, Coal India production went up. But what you're seeing in China is that coal prices are like coming down every day, and so at least my expectation is that a lot of this tightness in global energy markets is just waiting for that last mile supply to come in. And that supply will not come in very smoothly, right? It could just be some country grandstanding that I want this, otherwise I won't raise production. But finally they give in and say, let's make money. And so economic incentives kick in. There is a third aspect to that, which is the supply chain bullwhip angle, which I've been making on our steel call for a while. So in the first half, we were very bullish steel, and then we became very bearish steel. And that reality is that the further away you are from end demand, the more volatile the demand seems to be, right? So the apparent demand growth for steel is far in excess of the growth in end demand for steel. Like, if car production is not happening, if global housing construction is slow, who needs the steel? No one. It's just that it was there was a few cuts last year, and then steel came short, everyone, and then it sort of feeds on itself. It's like stock markets. I'm sure you'll have questions on that too. So it's the same, and I think that's correcting. So you must have seen global iron ore went to 230. So if you ask anyone, auto company, construction company, real estate developer, equipment companies, they're all complaining about high price of steel. But look at what's happening in China. In the last 2 weeks, steel prices have fallen $100. Right? Iron ore is now down to 83. The futures for iron ore in January are 83. Just remember, they were 230 just 6-7 months back. Look at coking coal. Look at thermal coal. Look at, on the tech side, where the volatility is the highest, look at DRAM, right? Memory, NAND or DRAM, and there are two types of memory, right? Or look at panel prices, right? The stuff that, the notebook monitor, the handset, or the TV. So those panels basically cut out of the same sheet. Those prices are also falling. So everything that is commodity and upstream is starting to ease. So which gives me comfort that some of the goods inflation trends that we are seeing are not likely to sustain. And one last point on that, even the freight congestions, right? So there's been a lot of noise about, and very validly, that there is a shortage of containers, there's a shortage of container ships. And what that did was it intensified the bullwhip. So what we found was that in the month of September, exports from China to the US were up 11% month on month. On average, they used to be up 2% month on month. So if you are a retailer in the US and you are trying to prepare inventory for Thanksgiving or Christmas sales, and you are told that, look, the lead time has gone from 20 days to 40 days. So you bring forward your orders. So what happens to the manufacturer? That guy just starts pulling his hair out and says, well, ab kya? So how can I do this? And October, the decline month on month is much worse than seasonal. Right? And which is why it's not surprising that container ship leasing rates or the freight rates are starting to fall off very sharply. You must have seen BDI, the Baltic Dry Index, has halved over the last 1.5 months. That's because of coal and iron ore. On the container ship side as well, there is a steep decline. So I think this is somewhat temporary. What we need to be, though, very careful about is US inflation. Wherever you have $3 to $4 trillion of pent-up savings, right? And you have these kind of congestions developing, and people start to bring forward their purchasing. If I was buying toys for my nephews or nieces for Christmas, instead of buying them in November, I would buy them in October. It was milega nahi, I mean, whether you will find it or not. So that I think, these are 2-3 things that we need to look out for. If the US consumer remains very robust, then perhaps the inflationary numbers look stronger. US services inflation also needs to be watched. Because that's clearly something that, as the economies open up, we'll have to see how much, and then the risk of inflation expectation getting reset. I don't see that happening in our neck of the woods.